Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, davedelaney.speaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show. As a business-to-business marketer, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long, and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. On LinkedIn, you'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior level executives. 10 million are C-level executives. You'll also be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B, and they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn is the social network that drives the most visits to my website. From all the different articles and interactions that I do on LinkedIn, I have to tell you, LinkedIn is awesome. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/NPN. Terms and conditions apply.
So I started going to a coffee shop that didn't have Wi-Fi. And so at this coffee shop, I could get a lot of work done. Mm-hmm. I would basically, sit down. A couple hours later, I would just get so much done. And so one day that coffee shop turned on Wi-Fi, and it ruined my sort of strategy. And I said, well, if we're never going to be able to get away from Wi-Fi, then how are we going to be able to fight back? And so what I did is I built the first version of Freedom, which was basically a button that you pressed on your Mac computer that locked you offline for 45 minutes.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
Welcome to the Nice Podcast, all about communication, collaboration, and becoming better leaders. I'm your host, Dave Delaney from Futureforth, where we help you retain talent and improve culture and communication so you have happier, more connected teams. Today, I'm speaking with Fred Stutzman. Fred is the founder and CEO of Freedom, which is software that helps you be more focused and productive by blocking distractions. And I will straight away say that I'm also a customer and love this. This is part of the reason why we're talking today. So with that, Fred, welcome to Nice.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me. So first question, I always like to kick things off with the same question, which is, what is the nicest thing someone has done for you recently?
Oh, boy. Well, recently, my Tuesdays so we're recording this on a Wednesday, and my Tuesdays are just all days meetings. And I had forgotten my lunch, and there's no time to go out and get lunch, and my wife brought me lunch. So it's a simple thing, but holy cow, it really saved the day.
Spouse to the rescue. I have to say, honestly, the majority of the answers are spouses doing something amazing, and God knows I could fill in the blanks over and over with my wife putting up with my shenanigans. So that's great. So I wanted to have you on for a little while to talk about leadership and then obviously communication. Talk to me a little bit about. Well, I guess first of all, let's go ahead and maybe share the quick elevator pitch of what Freedom is. And then I'd like to learn a little bit more about the company itself and how you run it. And then we'll get into the weeds on why people might consider something like this.
Sure. So, I guess Freedom is a company that was never intended to be a company. Then the backstory it goes back to when I was in graduate school. I was on a career track to become a researcher / professor. I was studying social media and information technology more broadly. And so I noticed how much time people were spending on social media and how that was affecting their lives. And so I built a simple tool. It was just a little Mac app that locked you offline for 45 minutes. And I gave it away for free, put it on my website, shared it, and it went viral. Over the course of a couple of years, people started asking me for features and enhancements and, make a Windows version, make a mobile version. And I eventually started doing those things in my sort of nights and weekends time. And eventually it got to the point where I said, this is a high impact problem. It's a really, it's a growing problem, and it's really aligns with my interest, which is building software that helps people. And so it became a company. And in 2015, we launched and built essentially a cross-platform service that allows you to block distractions across all your devices. And really the pitch is like one button and turn off all the noise on all your devices so you can really sit down and relax. And, that's Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, Chrome, you have it. We've got it covered. And we've grown from just myself to now we're over 25 people spread all over the world.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. So would you consider yourself, a professor first, a researcher first, a developer first?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've started a few companies. So I think the thing that gets me really excited is finding an area that is kind of emergent as a problem in a problem that is specifically like at the sort of human computer interface level, like, things that are changing that are going to force us to rethink how we interact with our devices, and building solutions for that. And so research was a really great place to do that. But the downside of research is you basically build your tool, you go and present it, and then you put it on the shelf. And my problem is like putting it on the shelf. Like if I'm going to build something, I get behind it. And I think that is ultimately sort of what led me to realize that I didn't want to stay on that path. But that path is the skills you learn researching, studying, all of that is very applicable in my day job. So I still sort of wear that hat a little bit, but I'm not teaching students.
Yeah, and I know what you mean with that too, with the idea of going all in on something and then and shelving it ultimately, as you're saying, like so creating a paper or papers in your case, or even as an early adopter myself of social media. Like I remember when Twitter had competitors back in the day, and I was a big fan of Foursquare in its earliest iterations as well. And so we're talking back 07, 08 or something. And back then, like Google acquired a Twitter competitor called Jaiku, and they also acquired, I think it was Dodgeball, which was whatever Foursquare was before that. Yep. And I got really excited as just a geeky kind of community person who loves technology, but also who loves connecting with people. I got really excited about the prospect of kind of microblogging, like while you're, but heavily with a location based approach. And of course, this is way before privacy concerns and dangerous algorithms and all of that. And they shelved both. Yeah, they bought them and shelved them and never heard about them again. And I was just like, oh man.
That was an exciting time. There was so much going on. And that was when I was starting these studies when all this was happening. And it really felt like there was a new era. And certainly, I mean, it's proven itself out. I mean, the world is connected. It's had, there's been a lot of good that's come in a lot of bad. And it's interesting.
Yeah. You wrote a paper or a study in 2006 called An Evaluation of Identity Sharing Behavior in Social Network Communities. So right there, what was the kind of finding from that? Because we're talking 2006. So that's like Twitter launched in 2006 and Facebook wasn't open to the public yet, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a very academic sounding title, but really what we did is we just looked at how much people were sharing. And so, that study was on Facebook before Facebook was generally available. And I mean, the thing that, came out of those studies was just a tremendous amount of sharing of information into a sort of semi-public area. And that was new. That was absolutely new and did spark a lot of the thought. We were doing kind of two types of research. One was like activity. How much time are people spending on these sort of new forms of technology? And the other was like privacy, which is what are they sharing? And it's like nowadays we don't think twice about it, but at the time it was really, really a shocking finding to find, people are sharing all their personal information, their relationship status, and they're spending like 6 hours a day on this stuff. It was really bolt of lightning stuff to researchers to find an effect that big. So, yeah, that paper was one of the earliest papers in the space that documented it, but I could have chosen a more descriptive title to it.
At the time, what were your mind, like where was your mind at as it pertains to privacy? Because I know, like especially back then, like Jeff Jarvis was quite I think he had a book called Private Parts or something, or that might have been Howard Stern as well. But anyway,
a good one.
Yeah. But I think he sort of downplayed to an extent the concerns for privacy with it, and making a great case that if the results of this is I start seeing advertisements of things I'm actually interested in, then that's a good thing. And it's happened to me. Like, it happens to all of us these days, but you see ads for like for me, a comedian was coming to Nashville where I live, and I would never have known he was coming here had I not seen an ad. And I bought tickets. So it was a win-win. So what are your thoughts on privacy from back then, maybe compared to now?
Yeah, that was such an interesting time, and actually, that launched my first company. So I guess like the things that we saw kind of launched a few companies. When we were doing those studies and looking at how much people were sharing about themselves, I got connected into this sort of community of people working on sort of the future of identity on the internet. So like Doc Searles, Dave Weinberger, Phil Windley, they had these conferences called the Internet Identity Workshops, which were just super, super fascinating. And, we were looking at like all of the sharing that was going on. And then, what does that mean to sort of be creating your identity online? Before it was like, if you had a homepage, like, that would be your online identity and you could share, but like not that many people had homepages versus everyone at, UNC Chapel Hill had a Facebook page and was sharing a ton of information publicly. So we knew there was this change. And so the thinking kind of led me to, if we're going to be putting all this information out there publicly, how do we claim it and how do we use it and how do we sort of leverage it? And so myself and a fellow graduate student, Terrell Russell, built a service called Claim ID. And Claim ID allowed you to basically claim all of the information that's about you online and then use it as an identity provider, which was like logging into things. So an early version of single sign-on. And like that's been, that whole space has been like, won by Facebook and Google and, a couple of auth providers. But it was this kind of Wild West at the time where it's like, oh, you could really actually build this social identity. And of course, all of that was built on the fact that like people were sharing all this stuff publicly. To where my head was back then, I didn't see all the problems. I think, I had sort of the rose-colored glasses around, there are certainly problems with sharing deeply personal information that can be screenshotted and come back to you. But like, I was like, well, there's really an interesting phenomenon going on. Can we like leverage it and give people more power and sort of more control? Yeah. Clearly, sharing all the information has some benefits. It also has some drawbacks, and like having all our information out there in databases that we don't control is a set of problems. But it's interesting. At the time, it was really this kind of Wild West, and again, another one of these problems that was like, okay, the stuff is out there. How are people going to control it? And so that sparked a lot of thought.
It's a good analogy of the Wild West, or almost like Westworld in a way, I guess, because it was like the Wild West without all the guns and things and all the violence. It was like, it was group, hugs. And I mean, in my book, I wrote about social in the early days and how, it was like I used to organize pod camps and bar camps and tweet ups, where you would meet your Twitter friends in person and buy each other a beer and have a great time. And it was the early days of like the podcast. I had a podcast in '05. And so podcasting conferences and events and things. And it was just really this kind of kumbaya vibe. But I almost say Westworld because there was probably some dark people scheming, like in a kind of Mr. Burns kind of rubbing his hands.
Totally.
And I do remember attending a tech conference in Seattle, kind of a small conference, and there was a speaker whose name slips my mind, but he actually he was talking about privacy as it pertained, I think, to Twitter at the time, and he started calling out people in the audience. So he had researched the attendees through social before, and then he posted, like, during the presentation, he would post like a photo of someone's backyard saying, "You really need to mow that yard," from Google Earth, or your kids are really cute in the non creepy way. But I think there was a certain level of like cognitive dissonance where most of us were like, "Did not see that. Did not see that. Did not see that." Back to Twitter.
Yeah.
So tell me about like how Freedom kind of came and Freedom, your company and software. Tell me how that was kind of born and came together.
Yeah. So the sort of gestation of it came from basically this point where I was about to graduate from graduate school, and I had just had we just had our first son, and I was sort of like on a little bit of a longer path in graduate school than I expected. I think it was like 5 years, but I was like, towards the end, I was not as focused as I had liked to be. So, but I was like, I need to get a job and I need to get my life in order. So, I was basically, because I was studying social media, I was like, basically allowed to spend a lot of time on social media, and like that was not doing great for getting my work done.
Right.
So I started going to a coffee shop that didn't have Wi-Fi, and so at this coffee shop I could get a lot of work done. I would basically sit down a couple hours later, and I would just get so much done. And so long story short. One day that coffee shop turned on Wi-Fi, and it ruined my sort of strategy. And I said, well, if we're never going to be able to get away from Wi-Fi, then how are we going to, how are we going to be able to fight back? And so what I did is I built the first version of Freedom, which was basically a button that you pressed on your Mac computer that locked you offline for 45 minutes, and put it online, gave it away, and it sort of went viral. And the reason it went viral, and I didn't know any of this at the time, but sort of analyzing it after, I figured the reason it went viral is because writers picked it up. And writers love to write about stuff. And so the moment, the moment that they got a new trick that would essentially help them with their writing, they wrote about it and shared it. And so it became viral. And for a number of years, I just kind of rolled with it and didn't really do much with it. I just thought it was kind of a neat gimmick. And I had done a couple other things like this. It wasn't the first software I'd written. So, I was just like, okay, whatever. And the funny thing about it becoming a business is the thing that I thought was going to prevent it from becoming a business actually made it a business. And that was, I had all these people who were writing me saying, make it for Windows. And I said, well, if I'm going to make it for Windows, I'm going to have to charge for it. And I was like, well, if I charge for it, no one's going to pay for it. And so the problem's solved. And so I remember I went to my advisor. I said, I need to take a week off and I need to, learn how to code for Windows. I'd never been a Windows programmer. And I need to write this thing in Windows. And so I did it and I put it online and I started charging for it and people started paying. And then more and more people started paying, and I said, there's something here. That just kind of became, a nights and weekends business at that point.
It's such a cool tool, and it kind of, functions really like a VPN, right? Where it just kind of except instead of like spoofing an IP, it just blocks access, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It can do, it's got so many features now, I have a hard time keeping track of them. But yeah, basically, block websites, block email, block apps, notifications. The thing that I've learned over the past couple of years is that everybody has a distraction. And, that thing may be the news, it may be sports, it may be social. But if you can, create some time where you promise yourself you're going to be focused and you don't have those distractions coming in. Number one, the world doesn't end while you're off, doing your writing or your research or whatever for an hour or two. Yeah. And you just get higher quality work done. And I think that's what drives us in the company is basically knowing that we're a partner to people as they do the really important things in the world. And it's just so cool. Like that's the impact we want to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said, you mentioned something that was interesting that resonated with me too, both as a writer, but also having run social media for companies over the years as an employee and also consulting and coaching as well, even. When you work in social media and you're using social networks to promote your business and so on, you are literally participating in social media. And if you're doing it right, at the same time, you're going to be really distracted because there's no way to avoid falling down those rabbit holes. So I'm curious, you're leading a company with 30 employees. Do you have like forced freedom blocks on your servers or tell me about how your own team, because by the way, I mean, while this is such a great product and a great service, it's kind of like to me, it's a little bit, not a little similar to like mindfulness and meditation where you should do it, or most people know they should do it, but like actually practicing it is a whole different thing. So tell me about like how it works at your company, because you're dealing with social media. I mean, that's literally what you're working on. So tell me about that. Support for this show and all the others on the Marketing Podcast Network is provided by Memento. If you have your own podcast and you know that producing it is half the battle, promoting it is the other half. What if you could upload your episode, video or audio, and have AI pull out the best moments to use those in social media promotions? Well, you can with Memento. Upload the video or audio, review the recommended clips, click a couple of buttons, customize the colors and fonts, hit save. Instant Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Facebook or LinkedIn posts, all with video or audio embedded for dynamic promotions that drive people to the episode. And the AI kicks out show notes and transcripts and even social media captions. All you have to do is review and post. Because you listen to this show, you can get a free trial of Memento to test it for yourself. Go to bit.ly/MomentoMPN and sign up today. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/MomentoMPN.
The one regret I have is that, so I run a lot of freedom sessions but they're because I'm constantly testing the product and the one thing that I've, lost as the company has grown is my ability to really block off that time and do work. And I struggle with this because there's so much meetings and more of the sort of ad hoc communication that needs to happen. And I try. So I have like Wednesdays. So today I don't do meetings, and I have a 2-hour session in the morning where there's no interruptions. I focus and I just block everything and work on some tasks.
Yeah.
Within the team, I know people have different uses of freedom, and there is a challenge because we're always testing it. It's not always being used for focus, but there are a number of people within the team who are heavy freedom users, and they do find that time to focus. And so, it's one of these things that you're right. You can't force it on people. We've taken a pretty strong stance that things like, net nanny type of big brother tools that block and track you, like that's just not our values, and we don't build those kind of tools. We do build tools that basically allow you to have control, and so our tools are basically opt-in, they're non-tracking, there's no data back-end aspect of it, which, from a business decision is, maybe not the best, but it's how we feel, you should be treated. It's a product you pay for and you get value for, and we don't do anything with your data. Now, I think there are things that you can do, and we talk about this within the company, to motivate people towards focus time. And that is, it's like gamification type things. You could imagine leaderboards, having synchronizations within Slack or something like that to let people know that you're offline or you're working on something. I mean, I think like the answer is not necessarily it's a tool. Like freedom is going to help you get there, but it's not going to get you there, the whole way. Like you've got to think about, what do I want to get done? When am I going to do it? When am I going to find the right environment to do it? And then really commit to that. And like that's a hard thing for people in general. Just as doing work is hard, just as going to the gym or any other hard task. And so I think when we analyze the amount of time that a knowledge worker, somebody who's got some level of management responsibilities, these people are lucky if they get 2 to 3 hours of work time a day, because so much of their time is on that manager schedule. They're in meetings. And so if you can take those 2 hours a day and make them higher quality, I think there's a lot of value add there. I think that's our challenge. We haven't figured it out yet. The thing about having a product that is primarily consumer is a lot of people who have already sort of gone over that, made that decision internally are our customers. And it's hard to force it on people, just like it's hard to force people to go to the gym. But as we push into the enterprise, there's a lot of thinking about ways to do that, to incentivize use in ways that, are, not that top-down draconian.
And you've done some work with like Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Tech. Is that correct? Or have you done?
Yeah, we've I
really love what they're doing.
Partners with them, and we support them, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had them on the podcast, and that's a great organization, and they do a lot of things, like their AI talk. People should really watch that. Yeah. And that's a whole other set of conversations, but absolutely. I mean, they were one of the earliest organizations really sort of raising awareness of the problem of distraction. And that was something that was great.
Yeah, I almost see when you mentioned that, I almost pictured like 2001, where like freedom is the button and the AI is. So it's like, what are you doing, Dave? To turn off the internet. Well, being a researcher, I'm sure and you did bring it up. So let's talk a little bit about AI. What are your thoughts on where we're at right now? I know there's a lot of crystal balls, but nobody actually has one. But there are all the smartest people I follow are raising a lot of red flags about sort of the future with AI. Not everybody, but a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just at a conference which was like supposedly about this one thing, but like basically everybody just talked about AI for most of the conference. And Sam Altman talked at the conference, so that was actually quite interesting.
Yeah.
The CEO of OpenAI.
Yeah.
So that was, it was actually kind of mind blowing. The thing that was mind blowing was just the degree to which people are concerned about AI. And, to the extent which, AI is talked about like it is some, nuclear bomb. And it's kind of interesting because the area that I studied, it's this area called, my Ph.D. is in information science, and our school basically did two things. One was like human-computer interaction, which is the stuff that I was in, and then the other is information retrieval, which is like search, and search is heavily AI. And so I've seen the work in this community for 20 years now, and the rate of change, I think, is not exponential. I've seen these tools, GPT, and versions of it for many years now. And so, as somebody who's been in the community, I'm a little less, I guess maybe I'm a little less alarmed. What I do think is scary, if we want to talk about what's scary, is the reasoning ability and the way in which conversations can be matched. My worst case scenario is, an AI that calls you on the phone and convinces you to do things. It's like, I grew up watching war games and, those kind of, movies where there's this very sort of dystopian angle. And like, I'm not so worried about like the AI, like hacking into the computer. I'm worried more about the AI convincing people to do things. And so I do think we do need to think about that. On the other hand, I look at what I've seen of AI and the way in which it can empower people who are not as strong communicators, who are learning how to, communication is really key. So the GPT angle has been really interesting, in which, it can enable people. I'm really, really excited about that. And of course, I think that the outside risk is like, and Sam Altman talked about this, they released the AI as GPT-3 and 4 as a way to sort of get people to understand what the AI can do. And the risk is like, okay, maybe there's all these other things we can't imagine that the AI can do. And like, we're only scratching the surface, but I'm not smart enough to to know all of those things.
Yeah.
But what I've seen has been, certainly concerning, but also, I do, even to this day, still have like rose-colored glasses around a lot of technology, and I think there's a lot of good it can do.
Do the rose-colored glasses still exist for social media?
It's funny. My dissertation was on social media, and I spend my day blocking social media, but there are things that social media is good for. And like what I studied was life transition. So when you're going through a change, you're moving to a new town, or you have a baby, or go through some sort of life transition, social media is extremely valuable. It basically gives you a sort of information network that is vastly powerful, and you wouldn't have on a day-to-day. And so there still are a lot of things that social media, is potentially good at. But I would, also argue that like some of those wells have absolutely been poisoned. I mean, Facebook's well has been poisoned, but as I look at the future of social media, I still think there's a lot of opportunity. And, instead of these sort of general purpose tools like the Facebooks and Twitters of the world, you probably will see more innovation around, the life transition or certain types of like objects or certain types of interactions. So, I think there's still a lot of area for social media to be, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if like a new college social media platforms are like evergreen because they're constantly going through life transition. There's a new batch of people going through life transition every year. So, Facebook's well has been poisoned, but like there's still opportunity out there.
Yeah, I'm quite curious to see where things go because traditionally, and by the way, so my first podcast was a parenting podcast in 2005 and my first tweet was putting my son to bed. Literally that's what I wrote, putting Sam to bed, in 2007. But back then, like with the podcasts, I had a forum. And so our listeners would interact with, now the podcast was pre-Twitter, pre-social really. I would have, our listeners communicate through the forum with us and the comments a little on the blog too. And they would communicate with one another. Actually, even going before that in 98, I lived in Ireland and I built like a singles forum where people like kind of like a sightings type of thing. Like I spotted you at the pub, you were wearing a red dress and a hat or whatever on Saturday night. And I created like a website for that. I didn't even own a computer. I did it at an internet cafe. And then I went to the university and changed all the home screens in the labs to the website. And two girls who were friends of mine and I handed out flyers. It was called Spotted Galway. Galway's a city. And so we would hand them out to people on the street. Have you been spotted? Have you been spotted? And they would go. But I say all that because social media was so good in what you're saying, like in the socializing aspect. And now and my book, New Business Networking, is about that, building relationships and connecting with others, finding your people, as Douglas Rushkoff always says, like find your people, connecting with folks online. But I find now let's say I'm a new parent and my kiddo has diaper rash. I am more likely to turn to ChatGPT for a prognosis or a recommendation rather than Google, where I have to sift through ads and questionable content until I actually get to something organic, or asking on Twitter or social for fear of, suddenly being inundated with ads for diaper rash or whatever it is. So I'm finding I'm spending way more time using ChatGPT to get the answers to things I'm looking for. What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts on that are, it is going to revolutionize search. It's it's going to revolutionize search. And it's going to revolutionize voice interfaces. Asking a question is a very natural human interaction, and Google and Alexa are bad at finding answers because they're trying to find documents rather than answers. And so I too have turned to GPT for certain types of queries. My favorite was a friend of mine who's a pilot. He likes to post photos of the city he's in. And I like to, travel a lot, and I like to see if I can figure it out. Well, he posted one, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, I think I really thought it was like Budapest, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I went to GPT, and I described the photo, and it figured it out. It was Brussels. So
wow.
There are these sort of next level abstractions that are more natural interactions for people. We want to get a question answered, and GPT is good at that. GPT is also, of course, like some people confident even when they're wrong. So there's a whole set of challenges around the answers that GPT gives you. But in search research, we talk about like sense making from a sense making perspective, which is like, just information in and trying to reason about the world. Like having a GPT as like part of that sense making makes sense. You can't rely on it completely, but you can rely on it, as a source of information as you sort of assemble information. I think like it's absolutely going to revolutionize voice interfaces because really the only thing useful to a voice interface other than like setting a timer is being able to ask it questions. And my kids of course love to ask Alexa questions, and Alexa can't understand the question or gets it wrong 75% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so I think you just get a voice interface to GPT and you're going to bring that error rate down.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it should make Thanksgiving dinner way more interesting too. I think in the future, as we fact check our questionable, family members,
much more real time. Yeah,
right. Well, and honestly, like I became a Freedom customer in 2020, and I think I used like your free product before that, but 2020 was it was kind of peak Trump. Plus, we have a pandemic kind of looming. Plus, police violence, and all the things. And then, in addition to those things, my kid's school was severely damaged in a tornado here in Nashville, and then our house was not destroyed, but we were knocked out of our house for 3 months while I had to deal with contractors and insurance claims. So it was like a very, very stressful year, and I made some big changes during that year. I started taking meditation and mindfulness seriously, so I started doing a daily meditation practice. I quit drinking for 30 days, and it'll be 3 years next month. So I quit drinking, and I started using Freedom to block the news and to block social media, and instead, like what I found, which was so great, is as I walked the dog. Or not walking, but like if I was standing somewhere out of habit, I would fire up a social app or, my phone. And so trying to do that and being locked out, I'd say, oh yeah, right. So I would fire up my Kindle app and read read a book.
Yep.
Remember books? It was so cool to like start reading books again. And I was reading way more than I had in a long time. So I do recommend folks check it out.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I mean, that those years were there was I've called them sort of information crises because the average person had to figure out how to navigate a pandemic, which was coming to kill you. We had unrest. We had this contested election. We had insurrections. There was so much destabilization of, our sense of the world. And so people would turn to the internet to like understand what's going on. And that became problematic became problematic for like so many of us because you're not controlling the world. But there's a never ending supply of information. And you could just be in it all day long. And I was 100% guilty of it during that time as well. And I used Freedom pretty heavily during those times because I was not going to get anything else done otherwise. And we saw during that time, of course, the rise of doom scrolling and people putting on doom scrolling blocks. That was like the one of the biggest drivers of our business. And then sleep. People would just not go to sleep because, again, you have information coming, you have this like important information coming to you at all times. And you can basically justify like, oh, I should know the latest thing about this pandemic because it's basically life and death. Right. Yeah. And, so they wouldn't sleep. And so, we would, see people, using Freedom to sleep, which is like a use case we never actually imagined, but you can, certainly know, like, it's not great when you wake up in the middle of the night and you check your phone and don't go back to sleep. And so, it was interesting to see, this tool that we had basically, or I had basically just like only ever really thought of this use case of like helping people write their papers be, part of the way they navigated a pandemic, which was, interesting.
Yeah, like providing mental health support. I mean, that's to an extent that's definitely part of that. Before we skip on to the lightning round, I did want to ask you a little bit. Now, selfishly, I am a keynote speaker, and I absolutely love presenting. It's one of my favorite things to do. So tell me a little bit about the Running Remote conference, because I saw that on your feed, and I was like, oh man, I wish I had been there.
Trust me, Dave, you wish you had been there, man. What a great conference. And it's going to be in Lisbon next year.
Okay.
So the Running Remote conference showed up on my radar via Chase Warrington, who's the head of remote over at Todoist, which is one of our partners. Mm-hmm. And so Chase was talking about how great it was, and they had kind of rebooted it last year, and this was the first year that it was going to really sort of be a big event. And so what it does is it brings together all the people who are doing sort of remote, who are I want to say thought leaders, but really doers, like chief of remotes and head of remotes and, senior HR folks, and also founders and people who are like building remote companies and bring them all together for a 2-day, well, it's like a 3-day conference. And so it's hosted by the guys from Time Doctor, and it was just amazing. So we went for a couple of reasons. One is a number of our partners were there, and it was great to see them. Also to learn about how these heads of remote think about, tools like a Freedom. And because they're in charge of the tool sets that people are implementing within their companies, we want to talk about that. And then also as a remote company, I wanted to sort of pick up, what's the best practice out there. And, it sort of hit the nail on the head for all three of those. And plus I had never been to Lisbon, and the conference venue was just at this amazing, ridiculous, place basically down on the water, the river. It's not really a riverfront. I don't know what it is. Kind of but it's not ocean. It's like the bayfront, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the weather is like, sunny and 75 with 40% humidity every single day. So.
And a pretty sweet deal for American expats who want to move there, because I have several friends who have picked up their families and done just that. And I spent 3 weeks there a number of years ago with my family, just kind of doing a road trip between Spain and Portugal. And I love it there. That's cool. Well, I'm hoping our paths will cross at a conference one day soon. Because I would love to meet up. All right. So let's move on to the lightning round, just to be mindful of time here. So complete this sentence. Nice guys and gals finish.
It's a lightning round. I've got to be quick. Nice guys and gals finish the job.
Nice. What's a nice book that you recommend the nice makers listening check out?
It's by Atul Gawande, who's the New Yorker writer, surgeon. It's called The Checklist Manifesto. And so that book was like really influential in how I think about problem solving, data, and it's just kind of an interesting way to organize life, which has kind of stuck with me.
I'll make sure to include a link here in the show notes. How is Fred nice to himself?
Going on bike rides. I'm a cyclist, and if I don't ride a bike, I'm really not being nice to myself. And so I need to make time to do that.
What's your favorite city in the world to cycle?
Ooh, that's a good question.
If you could go right now, pick up your bike, go somewhere, where would it be?
Well, I've done this once before. It was in the Dolomites in Italy. So, like around Cortina and in the mountains there. I had a trip there that was absolutely spectacular.
My wife and I, in our backpacking days, stayed there, and we were at a hostel that was also a chef school. And so all the backpackers got to eat like 5-star incredible food for like nothing. And it was back. I mean, we're talking pre-Euro. So it was a while back, but that's a lovely dream. Oh man. Yeah. That's a gorgeous, gorgeous part of the world. If you had a billboard, what would it say?
If I had a billboard, what would it say? It would say, well, I think I'd pitch my business and I would, but I just want people to know that turning off distractions does help you do better work.
Yes.
So, that's the pitch.
And drive safer.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that too. I think we kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah. It's a good one. Where do people find you? How do they learn more about what you do?
Cool. Yeah. I'm in a couple of places which I update regularly, but Freedom is just Google Freedom and will be the first thing that comes up probably. And then I'm on Twitter at fstutzman and LinkedIn fstutzman, and that's kind of it these days.
Cool. Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and keep up the great work. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show today. Would you do me a favor? Leave a review. The reviews help others discover the show, and they mean a lot to me, so I would appreciate that. Did you know I am often hired as a keynote speaker for company retreats or for conferences? To find out more about that, you can visit davedelaneyspeaks.com. Music by Alistair Crystal at alistaircrystal.ca. We'll see you next time. And be nice.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business and your life? Deb Eckerling hosts a great podcast called The Deb Show. Deb, tell the folks what they'll get out of listening.
Every week, I bring together 3 friends to dive into the topic, and it's anywhere from business professional to that all-important work-life balance. So it's always great personalities and a lot of fun and good conversation.
Awesome. We love that. Where can people subscribe?
Go to thedebmethod.com or find the show at marketingpodcast.net or search for The Deb Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.